got people!
Die, you monsters!
Fortune follows the brave, Cox.
Let's go!
And with that handle pull, our lives changed forever.
We are talking Ghost Planet. This is directed and written and co-produced by Philip J. Cook. Now this is a low-budget science fiction movie. From what I can tell, the budget was around $10,000. And this is what I like to refer to sometimes as a highbrow B-movie. It's a phrase I've used a few times here and there. So a low-budget, somewhat schlocky movie, but with kind of lofty and potentially somewhat more intellectual ideas. What is the story? It focuses on a crew of 3 salvagers, deep space salvagers, and they come across something potentially very valuable, but they are forced away by like a gravity pull or something like that, and they go back to Earth, and you know, it's effectively a missed opportunity, but no one can find their way back to this potential treasure. And on this Earth, it's kind of like a cyberpunk, futuristic, kind of dystopian style futurescape. At some point, they are approached by a benefactor who effectively wants them to try again, go back to this kind of planet and try and salvage this valuable commodity. And they manage to find a way, and when they get to this planet, it's not what they expect, and they are entities, shall we say, on this planet that are somewhat kind of unexpected. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So, what works in this movie? So this is a very low budget movie, as I've said. And for such a low budget movie, it is very, very ambitious and has a very kind of like quite out there science fiction ideas. Visually speaking, you can see influences from like Babylon 5 meets Blade Runner. The kind of the scenes set on Earth are very kind of Blade Runner, and we have a lot of kind of like Babylon 5 style kind of CGI kind of spaceships and things like this. So the majority of this film, I would suggest 97% of this film is filmed on green screen with kind of computer generated background. So when you compare it to something like Babylon 5, which used CGI back then, even though that was a higher budget production, you know, the CGI certainly in the external scenes are, you know, somewhat comparable. So if you're a fan of like Babylon 5 and that kind of style of VFX, you know, it's a comparable movie in some ways to that kind of visual sort of style, mixed in with this kind of Blade Runner futuresque kind of cyberpunk style cityscape scenes when we have them on Earth. So visually speaking, it's incredible what you can do these days with obviously a low budget and you know, a big imagination. So visually speaking, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. We're not talking like top grade CGI here, but you know, I gotta say, I was quite impressed with the visuals of this movie because we get a lot of different kind of aspects to it. You know, we have the Blade Runner style. We have the actual this planet, which is all kind of misty and spooky looking. We have the external outer space scenes, plus a few internals as well. You know, there's a fair amount of different kind of backgrounds and virtual locations that our characters kind of interact with, and I think it looks pretty good for the budget, I have to say. Also, the movie has some interesting kind of ideas. Our main crew of 3 are kind of all related, and you know, it gives it an interesting kind of family dynamic, as well as these more lofty sort of science fiction ideas and how these kind of half siblings and siblings are interacting and kind of their relationship compared to having these, you know, very out there ideas in regards to the sort of science fiction concepts and things, which I thought was quite, you know, it has that sort of that homely kind of you know, banter that you'll have with your family mixed in with people talking about pseudoscience and things like that. So I thought that was an interesting concept. And the actual ghost planet refers to, when they do get down to this planet, there are, I don't want to give anything away, but there are entities seemingly appearing like ghosts, which is interesting, but there's more to it even than that. So yeah, it definitely has ambition, it definitely has some science fiction ideas, locations in kind of, you know, atmosphere and stuff, and you know, backgrounds, a little bit of action thrown in, but it is more of a slow movie, it is more of a character-based science fiction ideas. It's akin to, you know, the kind of the pace of, like, you know, an average Star Trek episode, something along the lines of that, I would suggest. It's just not like an action movie per se. There is a little bit of kind of action towards the end, but it's not all that much, just to give you fair warning if you're, you know, what to expect of this sort of film. I think the characters are fairly kind of well defined, and we don't have a huge cast, which I think helps. So the characters are each individual. You know, our three siblings are all very different from one another, and we get a couple of other characters as well. Again, and they all have quite distinct personalities and stuff. And I actually kind of quite like the downtime in seeing these kind of like relationships and how they are sort of interacting, which I thought was quite fun. Yeah, so, you know, I gotta say, I thought this movie had scope, it had ambition, certainly a visual style, and some neat science fiction ideas. On the downside, I mean, this is a low budget movie, we have to understand, and I think this is going to be one of those, if someone watches this without really having watched many low budget movies, you know, the visual stylings look like green screen. I mean, you just can't get away with it. I think for the most part, the external shots look fairly good, but when we have green screen in like internal shots in like a building and stuff, then you know, it looks a little bit more obvious. I personally can not let that bother me to a degree, because I'm used to watching lower budget movies. However, I will say I do think they could have been more done with the costuming. Our main crew of three salvagers, for a lot of the time, just wear like hoodies, jeans, kind of t-shirts, and I was thinking, you know, they're just kind of like their normal hairstyles. I didn't really get the feeling that they were in the far-flung future, if that makes sense. We do see some other characters who are dressed in a more of a futuristic science fiction manner, but our main characters, for the most part, I've got to be honest with you, I think there could have been a better job done here with some of the costumings. It looks honestly like they've just walked in off the street and in the clothes that they've turned up to work in, and then they've just filmed it. So that was a little bit disappointing when so much effort has gone into creating these virtual worlds, to have our actors wear like, you know, a hoodie or something. I don't know, it took me out of it a little bit. And then even when we do have, and again, this is, I'm a little bit forgiving of what I'm going to say next, when we do have our more science fiction costumes, again, they're a little bit on the cheaper side. There's a couple of like masks I noticed I've seen on Wish.com and things, and you know, there's like sort of jumpsuits and stuff, but you know, at least there's an attempt here to have them kind of look a little bit more in the future, I guess. So there's that. So the visuals are, I think, impressive, but it's let down by some aspects. I have to be honest with you, I don't think the acting is super solid. It must be hard, obviously, acting on a green screen. I think the characters are relatively individual, but I don't think the performances were particularly kind of gripping. I think they lacked any real dramatic chops and kind of gravitas. It almost feels like a cutscene from a video game, you know, back in the kind of like the early days of those kind of style of games, if that makes sense. I think it's a little bit kind of like overcooked, and a little bit kind of like sometimes unenthusiastic. So yeah, the acting is touch and go, shall we say. I think the pacing of this movie could have been a little bit more riveting, if I'm honest. I mean, it has some interesting ideas, and I think visually it's kind of quite up there. But I think the pacing of the movie could have had a little bit more to it. We spent a long time on the Earth in these kind of like cyberpunk style sequences, and I didn't think we really needed to spend that much time there. If I'm honest, it's almost like they've made these virtual backgrounds and they kind of just want to show them. But I think it could have served the story to have a little bit more, you know, going on in regards to plot development and stuff. So it does meander every so often, I have to say. So, you know, it's certainly an ambitious movie, and I do think it's a good movie when you consider the budget. And as I say, I suspect that budget was around sort of $10,000, around that sort of time, that sort of price tag. So yeah, you know, it's that, but it could have been sharper. I feel could have been a little bit more engaging. The pace, I just think, as I say, is kind of the equivalent of a double episode of a Star Trek TV show, which might appeal to those of you who are into Star Trek, but with the kind of the visuals of early Babylon 5 and Blade Runner sort of style influences. So yeah, it's certainly a movie for if you're a B-movie, you know, fan and you don't mind the lower budget kind of aesthetic. I think there's stuff to enjoy here. I think it was certainly ambitious and made some good swings, and I think it's overall somewhat of an enjoyable movie if you have expectations in place and you're not expecting a mainstream Hollywood film. I will give this a 6 out of 10 because I do think that this is quite an impressive movie, certainly for the budget and the resources available to this. So yeah, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.